Hey guys, what is up? It is SkullFlag44 here, bringing you my Super Bowl preview Hawks Ramblings video, talking about, I don't know, just everything Super Bowl related and just the whole spectacle of the event. It is currently 3:22 on the Saturday before Super Bowl, so pretty much 24 hours before the Super Bowl. I'm gonna tell you how I'm feeling, telling you how things are going down, and what I'm expecting for this game. First off, I just have to say this is gonna be awesome. I mean, it's hard to dream up a better matchup, especially for me as a Seahawks fan. I mean, maybe throw some more like rivalry elements there, but I guess the Seahawks and Broncos were rivals in back when the Seahawks were in the AFC West, and it's kind of tough to have a big rivalry between two teams from different conferences. So this is pretty good. Number one offense, number one defense. I think the Seahawks are the better team. Or it's tough to doubt the Seahawks are the better team. It's just some people think the Broncos are going to be able to win with their experience, but I am not one of those believers. I think the Seahawks are going to win and could potentially win handedly. I don't know. I was kind of going back and forth, like, okay, who do I think win? Okay, I definitely think the Seahawks will win. I'm like, oh, is it going to be close? Is it going to be, or is it going to be, or can the Seahawks, do some damage and potentially not blow them out? Because I think Manning will keep it fairly close, but win, as big as you can get. And I'm starting to lean towards, I think the Seahawks, this is whatever they worked for, this is what they've been working for. Excuse me. Am I good? Okay, my mic just kind of freaked out. This is, what they've been training for, what they've wanted. This is how they've been practicing to prepare for this one event. The addition of Percy Harvin is huge just because, if they get in a situation where their offense isn't running the way they want it to, you throw Percy Harvin in there and bam, that's a huge just X factor. Just be able to flip the game, switch up the game, switch up the offense, kind of jumpstart it. And I think that's something they were really missing during the regular season. And part of the reason why their offense was struggling a bit because they didn't have that factor. But a lot of the reason that I think their offense struggled, or I wouldn't even call it struggle, but why people consider it struggling is because the Seahawks played really conservative, especially in the last half of the season. Like they kind of just hunkered down and were just going for wins, which you can't blame them. But they weren't really building towards anything else. They weren't like, okay, we have to keep our momentum here. We have to make sure everything's working right. All they needed to do was just make sure they were, just kept winning, and that's what they did, and that's what they hope to continue to do. But now, everything's off. I think we saw a little bit of that in the NFC Championship game, and they were able to put up 23 on the 49ers, who have a good defense, obviously at home. But then they didn't have Percy Harvin, and just not having that is just kind of a big deal. Although I was thinking about it, I was like, man, is Percy Harvin really a game changer? I don't really know if he is. Like, I think he'll make the outcome more decisive, but I still would have confidence in the Seahawks without him. Just because I think this is a good team, and when it comes down to it, they'll be able to prevail. I also think that the Broncos are going to score, and that's just something that's going to happen. I think the Seahawks will do a good job limiting them, but the Seahawks defense is all about bend but not break. They want to get their turnovers, and as long as the Seahawks are getting those turnovers and just kind of keeping it, just slowing the Broncos offense down, I think they'll be in good shape. And I think they have a lot of time. They've had a lot of time to prepare for that. People say, oh, Manning's had all this time to dissect the Seahawks, defense. But to be honest, Manning isn't going to change up what he does. Manning's been doing the same thing for the past, 10 years on the same consistent basis. He's had a really good year this year, but it's just kind of been the scheme that he's been in, I think. I've just been able to totally have complete command over this offense, and has a good squad around him. Well, the Seahawks have said they're going to change some things up. They're not going to let the Broncos run their pick plays. If they're gonna do that, they're gonna be physical. And if the referees let them be physical, the game's over, because the Seahawks are the most physical team out there, and they're not gonna lose on that. And oh man, there's just so much. Okay, so I'm gonna move on to my little notes here now. So this is as big as it gets, and it's kind of hard to just think of that. Like, man, it doesn't get better than this. Like, this is the Super Bowl. This is what you work for, and if you're a player, it's what you work for, and this is what you kind of root for as a fan. Like, just to get to this point, and just hoping that your team can get there. And then now, the Seahawks are here, and what's exciting is that they're here in it, but it's not like, I don't know, it's like they're here in a good way, like they deserve it, they deserve to be here, but it's not like, it still feels like they can get better, it's like, dang, if they can win this Super Bowl, against a really good team, there's no reason why they won't be back next year or the year after that. There's no slowing down this team. They've got a young quarterback, a young group of players, and they're only going to get better, to be honest, because we've already seen how much this defense has grown over the past year. And I don't know, the one other key is that from last year when Atlanta beat them after the Seahawks were able to come back and Atlanta drove down and was able to kick the field goal to win it. That was the game changer moment for the Seahawks, where I think they just stopped letting teams do that completely. Like, I have complete faith in the Seahawks that won't happen. I think another part of me thinks, okay, it could come down to that. It could be the Seahawks up 4. Manning has the ball with 2 minutes left, 3 timeouts, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is Manning's drive. This is what he does. This is his legacy, and this is his time to win it." But I think the Seahawks defense, is as good or better, because even though Manning is so smart, and the smartest quarterback, making all these things at the line, his passes aren't. Sherman called them ducks, and honestly, that's what they were. There's no really debate that he can't throw the ball as well as he once did, and if you loft the ball up there against this secondary, you're going to get intercepted. And how much that happens, that means they're going to have to do some dink and dunk plays. And if they can't really have a crazy deep ball, I don't know. It's hard for me to see Broncos winning. And then talking about the Seahawks versus Broncos preseason game, that was interesting because the Seahawks absolutely walloped the Broncos through the course of the game, 40-10. And while people say, "Oh, that doesn't matter," it is kind of, it shows that the Seahawks' depth is much better than the Broncos' depth. And if injuries become a factor, if both teams get injured, because it is the 20th, I don't know what exactly game of the season it is, but it's up there. This is one of the I guess they play 16 regular season games, and each team has played 2 postseason games, so will be the 19th game. And that's a lot of games, especially it's you add on 4 preseason games, so this is gonna be the 23rd game. So I don't know, injuries could become a factor, especially with all the wear and tear and how hard people are going to be going. And I think the Seahawks are just built to sustain that. And I also kind of think back to the Patriots game in Seattle last year, where the Patriots were able to move the ball a lot, but in the end, the Seahawks defense came through and Russell Wilson came through. I think that's pretty big, and that also kind of gets in the point of Russell Wilson just. He rises to the occasion really well. Like, he hasn't been lights out like people want him to be as of late, but he has always been able to be the better quarterback, it seems, and he's been able to step up and be as good or better than all the quarterbacks he's faced. And a lot of that's been because he's been playing at home and hasn't been playing against a quarterback like Peyton Manning. But when you compare, I like the Seahawks offense going against the Denver defense and the Broncos offense going against the Seahawks defense, it's like, the Broncos defense, people say, "Oh, they've been able to stop the run. That's all that Seahawks can do." It's like, man, good luck, because if this team, all they have to do is throw the ball. They can still do that. Like, you can pick your poison, especially with Percy Harvin. Lynch can have an impact even if it's not running straight at him, and especially once they get the pass game going or running game going. The whole other side opens up, and they're a balanced team. They're just hard to beat, and honestly, I think it might sound crazy to some people, but if this offense is, running on all cylinders, they can be as good or maybe even better than the Broncos offense. That might be a stretch of the Broncos offense. As good, they probably can't score as much points, but as good in the sense, just more complete, and maybe even better, because they've got the running game. And we saw, like last year, when they put up 58 points against the Cardinals, it's not necessarily about, one part of the squad. It's about the whole team together. Like the defense and special teams helps the offense, can score points, can put offense in good situations, capitalizing on that. That's something that the Broncos just can't do. They have a lower ceiling than the Seahawks in that regard. So that's something to look at. So now I'm going to talk about, what are the reasons the Broncos and Seahawks will win. Okay, so I'll start with the Broncos first because I think it's a smaller amount. The Broncos will win because it is Peyton Manning's legacy. This is his game. This is the game that, kind of plants him in as like one of the best quarterbacks ever, because he only has one Super Bowl ring, and to be one of the best quarterbacks ever, and maybe even the best quarterback ever, you got to win more championships than that. And this is kind of all that he's worked up to, especially coming back from injury would be the final, thing on top. And I guess the Seahawks are able, or the Broncos are able to protect Manning where he gets no pressure and is able to just kind of dissect the defense, and eventually, even though the Seahawks defense is good, they're able to kind of just slowly, just wear them down and able to come through in the end. That I kind of, maybe you can tell I kind of just lost my enthusiasm saying that, just because it sounds kind of ridiculous to me and I just can't imagine it happening. And the big thing, which leads me into why the Seahawks will win, is getting pressure on Manning, which a lot of the pass rushers for the Seahawks have said that's really important. There's been hints that maybe the Seahawks will make Benson Mayowa active, which is another pass rusher, just throwing something else at them, because they haven't been able to study Benson Mayowa. He hasn't really played all season. I'm pretty sure he did play against them in the preseason, so maybe they could go off that, but that'd be a weird adjustment, and just throwing something else in the pass rush just to try to create pressure, because even though Benson Mayowa isn't as good as some of the other pass rushers, he's as fresh as can be, he's a really good athlete, and just throwing something else at them will just make them think more, and when you have to make more decisions, it's tougher to deal with, and just throwing another wrench in there could be big. But that's kind of a stretch. He said God is good on Twitter, and then one guy was like, maybe the Seahawks make him active, and I'm like, dang, that's not a bad leap, because I think the Seahawks are going to do something surprising to try to win it, and I think both teams will, which I'll get into later. So the Seahawks will win because they're just a better team overall. In championship games, the better team usually wins. The Seahawks have the better defense, not the better offense, but they have the better special teams. And when it matches up, the differences between the Broncos offense and the Seahawks offense isn't as great as the difference between the Broncos defense and the Seahawks defense, and the Broncos special teams and Seahawks special teams. So that's, I think it's gonna be hard for the Broncos to win, just because I think this team is so good. And even if they, I've heard people say, I'm gonna call out Bill Simmons here because I'm sure he'll listen to this and he'll care, that he said when the Seahawks came back from down 10-0, it was like, the most surprising thing, because out of all the teams, the team that he thought couldn't come back from being down multiple scores with the Seahawks. And it's like, have you watched any of the Seahawks games this year? It's like, or even last games. You could just watch only the national games. And like last year, the Seahawks were down 20 in the fourth quarter, came back to take the lead. This year, the Seahawks were down 21 to Tampa Bay, came back. And it's like, obviously those are different, but to say they can't come back, you'd have to say, I guess the only example the Broncos coming back was that San Diego game, and where San Diego just kind of fell apart. And it's like, man, really? You're gonna say that? And so that's why I think it's kind of ridiculous. Like, you can't. I think that if the Seahawks could get to Manning, and if they get to Manning a couple times, Manning hasn't been sacked in the postseason. If they can get to Manning, then it could be over quickly. While it's going to be hard for the Seahawks to give the game away, very quickly. I guess even if their offense is struggling, they have all the pieces to be able to come back quickly, especially with the special teams advantage. So the keys of the game, so like I said before, it's the pass rush. I think running the ball is going to be big if they can get that going, because it seems like once the Seahawks are able to start running the ball effectively, they just are on point and it's over. But that, I think they could have to use their passing game to try to get the running game going, and I don't know, hopefully they have a good game plan for it, and it's going to be interesting. Big audition for Dale Bevel to prove that he has good play calling, and it's going to be, I don't know, like the idea of good play calling isn't that people say, oh wow, that's some great play calling. It's that people say, oh, that wasn't bad play calling, especially for a team like the Seahawks, where they don't have to do anything crazy. They just need to be good enough and let their defense kind of win it. And then the Harvin healthy factor. Percy Harvin's played 2 games this season. One game he was just kind of in there for a bit, just kind of a warm-up game. The other game he got knocked out, and if he's able to stay healthy, which hopefully he will be, we know that he's going to be going all out for this game. He's never played in a Super Bowl. He's going to be pumped up, trying to prove to his teammates he deserves to be in there, deserves to be playing hard. I guess the only thing you really have to worry about with Percy Harvin, it seems like, is the concussion. I mean, knock on wood, you don't have to worry about anything else. It's just like, you know, I mean, that's the concussion is the one thing that you just really can't come back from. And I guess like a broken leg or a tear, but I mean, like a sprain, I mean, he gets nicked up a bit, it's not going to be a big deal. I mean, he's going to be in there getting shots at halftime to try to get back in there. So if he's able to stay healthy, I think this offense is going to be running on another level, especially against this mediocre defense of the Broncos. My prediction, I think the Seahawks are going to win. Obviously, it's not going to be an easy game, and I'm not taking it for granted. Like, I'm not going in like, oh, this is just going to be fun. Let's see how the Seahawks are going to do it. But I think just all the pieces add up. I mean, when you're looking at all the pieces, the Seahawks have the better team, and advanced stats have proven that, and other stats have proven that. And I think, you know, the fact that top defenses in the Super Bowl have done really well, and top offenses have done, you know, just average. And when top offenses face top defenses, the defense usually wins. I mean, the whole history of defense win championships, you know, that whole thing. And the fact that they thrive on that underdog chip on their shoulder mentality, and they're getting that with Vegas thinking that, or not Vegas thinking that people thinking that the Broncos are better. One interesting thing to note with Vegas, because people like to say, "Oh, Vegas knows," is that the game opened up as the Seahawks favorite, which so the Seahawks, you know, Vegas thinks the Seahawks are better, but the public quickly switched that to the Broncos being the favorite. Which is good because, you know, Vegas is kind of like that enigma, like, oh man, they, you know, kind of like use that black magic. You never really know what they're doing over there. You know, they always seem to be, they're not always right, but like, you know, have a good idea of what's right. And, you know, the fact that it started at, you know, being the Seahawks favorite makes me a little happier than it, you know, it just seems like a perfect storm. Like, okay, starts as the Seahawks favorite, then moves to the Broncos favorite. Okay, now the Seahawks can use that as, you know, just leverage, another chip on their shoulder to use it, to try to, I don't know, win the game. I don't know. It's like, it's really tough to tell. I mean, I'm not going to do any score guess because I think this game goes so many different ways, which is why I think that's why one of the reasons I think the Seahawks are going to win, because I think the Seahawks have the ability to adapt to multiple different ways. Like, if the game becomes a shootout, I think they can do that. I mean, last year in Atlanta, Russell Wilson's shown that if you force him to throw the ball a lot, he can hang in there. Or if it becomes, you know, just a defensive struggle, I think the Seahawks have the edge there. And you know, you might say, okay, if the shootout, the Broncos have the advantage, but I think the Seahawks will be able to keep it close, and in the end, in the clutch, the defense will come through. The one thing that, if you're listening to this before the Super Bowl and you want to have something to keep in mind, is that throughout the season, whenever you want to count the Seahawks defense out, they've stepped up and made a big play. So just keep that in mind. If it's looking bad, looking down, just wait for that big play, because it's probably coming. So that leads into my no freak out / stress plan. So I'm never going to be comfortable in this game until, this is kind of what I've said. Who knows if I'm going to, you know, what I'm actually feeling, but I'm never going to say I'm comfortable until the game is over. Either way, win or lose. I mean, I'm not going to be comfortable if they lose, but I'm not going to be relaxed or I'm going to be on edge the whole game. And the only reason but I'm only going to be like stressed out or kind of concerned if the Seahawks are down multiple scores in the fourth quarter. And that's when it'll start to be, okay, they might need to start making some plays here sometime soon. But when people say they need this drive, they need a touchdown, it's like, come on, they don't need any, like, everyone knows it's possible, you know, with 2 minutes left to score 2 touchdowns. Like, that's a legitimate possibility. It's tough. There's no doubt it's tough, but it's not like they need to do anything before that point. You know, it's not, when you stress need, it just, it drives me crazy. So then that leads into matchups and advantages. Doesn't lead into it at all. I'm just saying that. Moving on to another piece. I guess I kind of already covered that. I just think I'll kind of talk about specific positions. I mean, is there anyone on the Denver defense that would start over any of the Seahawks? Like, they have their pot roast player, which is a pretty funny nickname. But it's like, I mean, maybe he would be in there, but they already have Brandon Mebane, who's a better player, and their pass rushers are better, and their whole secondary is better. Linebackers are better. I mean, maybe just a couple players, but wow, I mean, that's just a huge gap. Well, you know, Lynch would definitely start over Moreno, even though Moreno's, I think, a pretty good fit for Denver. I mean, you'd probably put Manning over Wilson, but I mean, you try to put Manning in the Seahawks offense, it just wouldn't work right. I mean, Manning's all about his offense. I mean, he runs that offense. And I just don't think that'd fit right. So I don't know. It just seems like the Seahawks have the edge on a lot of different pieces. So now the surprise factor. So I kind of hinted at this before. It could be a surprise activation. Could be a trick play. I just think something's coming from both sides. So one thing that would be interesting to me is if they put Christian Michael in there, because they've hit him kind of like they haven't really done much with him, but they were high on him when they drafted him. They drafted him when they really didn't really need a running back. So it's interesting, but they haven't really used him all season. When he's been in there, he's been really electric. And so, while the logistics of him being active just don't really work out right, because you'd have to make someone else inactive, and just to do that when things have been working would just kind of go against what the Seahawks do. Although they've shown that they're not afraid to make James Carpenter active or Michael Bowie active the next week and do some weird things. So that'd be a huge X factor, because he can really do some exciting things. Although with Harvin in there, they might not need to do that. If Harvin was out, I think this would be a bigger play, because Christian Michael's not really the same type of player, but kind of has that same X factor, change the game factor. The other piece that I talked about before is Benson Mayowa being in there just as an extra pass rusher. Maybe you make Mike Morgan inactive, because he's just a special teams player that beginning of the season I was wondering, why is he on the team? He's been active, but I don't think his special teams is necessarily a game changer that Benson Mayowa couldn't replicate. And that'd be big, because it's just another pass rusher, another guy to put in that rotation to give constant pressure on Manning, because I think that's going to be really important for this defense. And then, let's see. For Denver, I'm trying to think. Like, maybe they do like a fake punt or something, like an onside kick. Like, I don't know. Maybe they do something with their defense to try to slow down the Seahawks, because I think they're just gonna kind of stick to their guns on offense and do what they do. Like, it would make sense for them to try to use the run game a bit more, but part of me, it's like Manning has so much power, it seems like, and he's all about his stats, and makes him sound like put him in a bad light, like he's egotistical and worried about his stats, but it's kind of what it is. He is shown that he wants to score the touchdowns, he wants to get all the yards, he's going for the records, even if he might say otherwise. Like, that's kind of what he's doing. He's trying to build a legacy and trying to get a win for himself, more so than the city of Denver, the franchise of the Broncos, which I think is a little different than the Seahawks are. Obviously all these players are trying to get a win for themselves first, but I think Manning's really getting himself a win first, and it's like, oh, if the Broncos organization's happy, that's cool. Well, other players might be like, okay, we're trying to get a ring too, but man, it's also really nice to try to get a ring or a championship for Seattle too. So I don't know. I think it'll be probably more on defense. So I kind of already talked about Wilson's big stage factor, how he steps up to the occasion. Okay, Lynch is going to be big, because he's had a lot of, there's not really controversy about him, but maybe a little controversy, just kind of the way he interviews and all that sort of stuff, doesn't like talking to the media. But I think he's going to be running hard as hell. I've kind of noticed that in big games he kind of steps up and is able to be going harder, and to put him in the Super Bowl, especially after all this, how much he wants to go and prove him wrong. Lynch is the type of guy where, like, you add a little extra juice in him, and you watch out, and especially when he can make crazy cuts. Watching him in college, it's like, I remember watching college and viewing him as more of like a guy that made cuts and didn't really have as much power, or had like, great agility and a little touch of power when he shifted over to a big power back with a little touch of agility. So he could be a big factor, especially, I think that it'll probably come on later when he'll start pounding away. It could be big. It's just gonna be a great game. It's gonna be really fun to watch. Pass rush I mentioned is important. Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, Chris Clemens has kind of been absent. Maybe he steps up again. Bruce Irvin, has been absent, at least in the past game. He's been great as linebacker, but in the past game hasn't been there. I think they're going to do some really interesting things to try to get pressure on Manning. They have all the pieces. It's just kind of getting the schemes right. And I think Dan Quinn is a defensive line expert, and with him not having to worry about any coaching jobs anymore, he can really focus in and try to figure out the best way to attack Manning. I think it's going to be good. Other people's predictions, just kind of how people think that the Broncos are going to win, and it's just like makes sense, and maybe the Broncos are going to blow out the Seahawks. If there's one thing I'd put money on, the Broncos aren't blowing out the Seahawks. Seahawks haven't been blown out in like 50 some games. It's like they say 50, but they haven't. I view it more as like a one score game, which kind of shows the scale. Like, other teams view blowouts on like the 20 or more point scale, but the Seahawks and me, I guess, view blowouts on the more than one score scale. So I just don't see that happening. And if it does, it'll kind of shake my. I mean, if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, it's kind of gonna kind of rattle my intelligence and what I think of the Seahawks and cause for some reevaluation, which would be fun. I mean, you gotta just kind of enjoy this experience and the whole spectacle and just enjoy the moment. Like I mentioned before with the NFC Championship game, it's like this is just a great game. The Super Bowl is just so fun to watch. I'm gonna try to soak up every minute. I'm trying to figure out how I want to manage my day tomorrow. I'm probably gonna create some sort of schedule because I'm gonna not be able to go to sleep tonight and just try to get it down and just kind of, I don't know, get everything out of the way for the big game. And I don't know, like I have my Fitbit stuff to try to get all my activities, so I want to get all that done before the game and try to get that out of the way early. And I figure, okay, I'll probably be awake early because I'll probably be so excited. Maybe go for a run early, run around, listen to some podcasts. I don't know. But the interesting thing about the Super Bowl is like, man, every single second of it is great. It's like there's no time off from, I think it starts at 3:30, so I'll probably be plopped in on the recliner at 3, eyes glued, because that, that's like, I guess the biggest pregame. Of course, pregame shows are happening now already, but that's when it'll be at its biggest moment. And I don't know, just trying to soak it all in, and especially with the commercials and stuff, because sometimes the Super Bowl's most exciting for its commercials. It's like, for a lot of people, it's like, oh, the commercials are great. Which one's funny, which one's not. And if you don't really care what the, what's happening with the game as far as teams go, it's still a fun game to watch. But I remember some years where it's like, oh man, the commercials, that'll be really fun to watch. But this year it's all about the game, and the commercials are the bonus, which is nice. So that's gonna be good. And the halftime show with Bruno Mars, Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's like, man, how am I gonna manage my time? Find out when I'm going to the bathroom, when I eat. And it's like, gotta find foods I can watch and eat at the same time and don't get all messy. And what do I decide to check Twitter? Do I just check out of Twitter? Probably got to check Twitter. I mean, it's part of the experience. But how do I get that right? I mean, do I set up a little stand where I get a constant scroll? Like, oh man, what the heck do I do? I got to figure all this stuff out. I mean, obviously I don't have to figure all this stuff out, but this is what my brain's thinking of. I already talked about the Las Vegas, what they think, and then Super Bowl bingo. So this is pretty interesting to me. So the SB Nation people do a Super Bowl bingo, or a bingo thing for some big games, like if the announcers mention that Russell Wilson's short, if they mention the legalization of marijuana or different things like that, and you play bingo, if it's mentioned or if it happens in the game or something like that, you cross it off and it's like a bingo. So that'll be kind of fun, just to throw in an extra thing. I don't know, I printed out the board, but it's like they tweeted it out at the same time, but I don't know, there's a lot of other things to figure out. So that's my thoughts. I'm going to go take a shower, and if I think of anything, other things, I'm going to come back. But if not, I'll just end it. Really pumped for this game. It's going to be great. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you at some point later. All right, I'm back. Just have a couple more things to add. One thing I forgot to mention was Richard Sherman. I mean, how could you forget him? I don't know how I did, because he's been a big topic. And one thing I just want to say is I have complete faith that he's going to be excellent. I think he's a guy that just steps up to the big stage really well. I mean, this is what he wants. This is almost his ideal scenario out of this whole thing. And I think that he's just going to perform really well. And if the Broncos are able to beat him, they're able to beat him. It's not whether he's going to play well or not. I think he's going to play at a really high level. It's just whether they can be better than that. And I don't see them being significantly better than that on a consistent basis. Another note I wanted to add is that, just how awesome this experience is, and just how much you got to thank, God for this, just everything. It's like, man, a lot of players are thanking God for, putting themselves in a situation. But I feel like, man, this is one of like my dream scenarios, just to be able to watch the Seahawks play like this. And, so I have to thank God for that. And, it's like a lot of people dream of playing the Super Bowl, but honestly, that's not really something I dream about. Like when I think the Super Bowl, think playing the Super Bowl, I think like, oh, pressure, stress. It's like, that's not really something I thrive on. It's like, I think I overthink the moment and just get too concerned about everything. And I don't know, that's just not something I get. Even in like playing Frisbee, I'm much happier, being that assist assist guy that doesn't have all the attention on him than the big play guy, I guess. Like, my favorite points in Frisbee are when someone throws it up, it's between two people, and I'm able to come in there and try to either break it up or try to grab it. When you don't have any expectations, you're able to make a play. That's my favorite favorite type of play. So that's something I have to say. And I'm trying to think, like, I mean, I guess would be better if I was like an executive on the Seahawks, but like I don't really. I played football for 1 year and it was fun, but it just wasn't for me. You know, it was I don't know. It's just like, man, it's hard for it to get better than this in my eyes, to be honest. Like the Super Bowl, you know, the biggest sporting event in you know, America, and you know, with the Seahawks in there, with this awesome team, awesome sport. It's just like you got to stand back and say, dang, this is pretty good. And at some point you got to stop looking ahead to the future and just kind of soak up the present, and like, dang, this is something pretty sweet that's going to be looked back upon for a while. So you got to thank God for that. And I don't know, it's just going to be a really fun game. You're just going to try to enjoy it all. And you know, the past 2 weeks I've just been looking ahead to this game. You know, even last weekend it just kind of felt like a kind of weekend, because it felt like, I don't know, just part of the week. And you know, because everything's been leading up to this one game. Today it's just kind of been doing different things to try to waste time to lead up to the game. It's just a weird thing when this, you know, the game is just the biggest thing, and it's going to be weird when it's over, you know, because I'm sure there'll be some analysis afterward and trying to figure out, hopefully it'll be a good thing. But then I don't know, it's just like, man, you just got to soak it all in. It's going to be fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I will talk to you guys after the game, I'm planning on, unless it's just an awful loss and I'm just like, oh. But even if they lose, like, I'm planning to stay pretty upbeat, because this season, I mean, I wanted them to get to the NFC Championship game, and they did that, and now they've gotten to Super Bowl, and if they can win it, that'd be great. But it was a great season regardless, and although I think they can win, I think it's gonna turn out well. But who knows? They still have to play the game. It's not up to me. It doesn't matter what I think, what anyone thinks. It's a matter of who can put the best performance out there on the field. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.